New York City, a world where power is earned in shadows, loyalty is tested by blood, and love can be both a weapon and a weakness. Isabella Moretti, the Mafia queen who rules the underworld with authority, cunning, and an unexpected, dangerous love. Tonight, her empire faces betrayal, rival factions, and choices that could cost everything. Which city are you watching from? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay close, the shadows are alive, and her story is about to begin. New York City, a world where power is earned in shadows, loyalty is tested by blood, and love can be both a weapon and a weakness. Isabella Moretti, the Mafia queen who rules the underworld with authority, cunning, and an unexpected, dangerous love. Tonight, her empire faces betrayal, rival factions, and choices that could cost everything. Which city are you watching from? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay close, the shadows are alive, and her story is about to begin. Tonight, in the towering glass fortress of one of the most feared crime families, the city would witness the rise of a queen, a figure so enigmatic, so ruthless, yet so impossibly human, that she could bend loyalty, fear, and love to her will. Isabella Moretti stepped out of the black armored car, her heels clicking against the wet pavement with a precision that demanded attention. Even in silence, her presence commanded the room, her aura a mixture of danger and allure that seemed almost unreal. Her eyes, dark as midnight, scanned the streets with a quiet intelligence, noting every movement, every shadow that might harbor threat or opportunity. In that glance was the weight of choices made and battles survived. A humanity hardened by loss yet softened by an unexpected longing she rarely admitted even to herself. Tonight, her mind was not on revenge, though vengeance had been the architect of her rise. It was on the delicate balance between control and connection, the invisible threads that linked the Mafia hood with New York City's elite, the state, and the hidden corridors of power where decisions were made before the public even knew they existed. Her second-in-command, Marco the Hawk Santini, moved beside her with the quiet efficiency of a predator. He had known Isabella since childhood, when both had been orphans navigating the treacherous streets, and he had never wavered in loyalty, even as the city tried to break them both. He understood her in ways no one else could. How her strength could conceal her vulnerability, and how the fire in her heart could inspire fear and desire simultaneously. As they entered the dimly lit Mafia club that throbbed with danger and forbidden temptation, the chatter paused, the music softened, and every gaze turned toward her. Isabella had arrived not merely as a visitor but as a force, a dark love embodied, whose name whispered in shadowed corners could topple alliances and ignite wars. Behind the veil of glamour and wealth, the club was a chessboard, every patron a piece moving toward an unseen endgame. In the smoky haze, men in tailored suits and women adorned in diamonds and silk all waited to see the queen who had conquered rivals with grace and terror alike. But beneath the surface, a different tension pulsed. An unexpected love that had begun as a strategic alliance now threatened to unravel carefully constructed walls. Antonio Rossi, the Mafia king from the rival family, watched from a private balcony, his expression unreadable, as he traced her movements with calculated interest. Their encounters had been rare but electric, each exchange a mixture of veiled threats, flirtation, and unspoken understanding of power. In the shadows of the city that never truly slept, these two forces of the underworld were drawn together by a magnetism that promised both salvation and destruction. The first few minutes passed like a heartbeat held in suspense, the hum of the city outside contrasting sharply with the electric tension inside. A sudden altercation in the bar, two men from a minor gang overstepping boundaries, erupted into a violent scuffle. In an instant, Isabella moved with lethal grace, a whispered command sending Marco and her enforcers to contain the chaos. Every motion she made, every word she spoke, carried the weight of authority, and in that controlled storm the room understood. Respect was not requested here, it was demanded. Outside, the rain had intensified, each drop a percussion on the asphalt, echoing the rhythm of the city's heartbeat. The night was far from over, and with it, the subtle dance of alliances, betrayals, and forbidden desires would begin to weave a tapestry of suspense that no soul could predict. Isabella's eyes flicked toward the exit as a shadowy figure approached. Unexpected, uninvited, yet impossible to ignore. It was here, in this moment of fragile equilibrium, that the lines between loyalty and betrayal, love and survival, power and humanity would blur, setting the stage for a series of choices that would shake the foundations of the New York Mafia hood. In the quiet that followed, only her heartbeat seemed audible, a steady drum of anticipation, fear and desire. Every patron, every gang member, every whispered conversation now revolved around the Mafia queen who ruled the shadows, the woman who could command the city without ever lifting a weapon, and yet whose humanity, the unexpected love she carried, threatened to become both her greatest strength and her deepest vulnerability. The first encounter of the night, a brief glance, a subtle nod, a whisper of recognition planted seeds of intrigue and curiosity. The next moments would escalate the tension, revealing hidden loyalties, dangerous desires, and moral choices that would challenge not only Isabella's control over her empire, but also the fragile threads of the humanity she so carefully guarded. In these first 7 minutes, the stage was set. A dark, cinematic world of wealth, power, and forbidden love, where every heartbeat could signal the rise or fall of empires, and where Isabella Moretti stood at the center of it all. Unshakable yet human, feared yet unexpectedly vulnerable, a queen ruling shadows that hid both danger and desire. The city, drenched in rain and secrets, waited to see who would dare challenge her, and who would surrender to the gravity of the dark love that surrounded her like an invisible crown. As the clock ticked and the storm outside mirrored the brewing chaos within, the night promised one thing above all. In the world of Mafia clubs, power and respect were earned, humanity was tested, and unexpected love could be as lethal as any bullet. The storm outside had grown louder, as if echoing the storm within Isabella's mind, each raindrop striking the pavement like the drumbeat of a city that never forgave weakness. She moved through the velvet haze of the club with the grace of a predator, her eyes sharp, calculating, scanning for threats or opportunities in equal measure. Marco's presence was a silent reassurance beside her, his steady gaze tracing the crowd, reading intentions no one else dared reveal. Every conversation, every smile, every laugh was layered with deception, alliances hidden beneath the sheen of glamour, promises whispered in corners where no light reached. Isabella's reputation preceded her, whispered like a secret in the veins of New York City power and contacts control, yet she understood that in a world ruled by fear and respect, no one's word could be trusted, and every gesture carried weight. As she approached the private lounge, a group of lesser gang leaders immediately parted, bowing their heads in a mixture of fear and reverence. The Queen of Shadows did not request loyalty, it demanded it silently, naturally, like gravity itself. Yet tonight, the city was different. The tension was palpable, as if the streets themselves held their breath. A subtle signal from Marco alerted her to a familiar presence at the far end of the lounge, a man whose appearance sent a ripple through the underworld like a stone thrown into a still pond. Antonio Rossi, rival Mafia king and the man whose dangerous charm had captured her attention more than once, stood there in his tailored suit, his eyes flicking toward her with that perfect balance of challenge and fascination. Their history was complex, a dance of strategy and temptation, each move measured, each word loaded with unspoken meaning. Isabella knew that every glance exchanged between them carried the potential to ignite alliances, wars, or forbidden desires. The room seemed to shrink around them as their gazes met across the smoky haze. Every patron, every enforcer, every whispered conversation paused, consciously or not, for the silent tension of power and unacknowledged attraction between these two formidable figures. The first subtle gesture came from Antonio, a half-smile that spoke of respect, recognition, and danger, and Isabella returned it with a measured nod, the faintest curve of her lips concealing thoughts as sharp and unpredictable as the knives hidden in her private chambers. In that moment, the air between them was thick with anticipation, and the club became a stage for a psychological duel where words were weapons, and silence could wound as much as a bullet. Behind her, Marco noticed subtle shifts in the crowd, murmurs of alliance and dissent rising like a tide. Isabella's sharp mind parsed the movements, the loyalties, the possible threats and opportunities, her humanity threading through the calculations like a fragile flame in the cold darkness of power. She understood that leadership in the Mafia hood was not just about control. It was about understanding the hearts of men and women who would kill, lie, or betray for power, and knowing when to extend mercy or wrath. The first small conflict erupted near the bar, a seemingly trivial argument over territory that carried the potential to spiral into violence. Isabella's approach was silent but commanding. One word, a glance, a movement of her hand, and the quarrel subsided, leaving only stunned respect in its wake. Marco's admiration for her was quiet, a loyalty forged through childhood hardship, shared secrets, and countless nights surviving streets that would have devoured others without mercy. Yet even he could sense the tension building beneath her composed exterior, a storm of decisions, desires, and moral dilemmas waiting to erupt. Antonio's approach disrupted the subtle equilibrium of the room. He did not enter with force, but with the understated confidence of a man who had conquered empires and survived betrayals, his presence alone reshaping the flow of attention, strategy, and silent power. The brief conversation that followed, careful, precise, layered with hidden meanings, hinted at alliances that could shift the balance of power, betrayals waiting in the shadows, and a growing awareness of unexpected love that neither would admit aloud. As they spoke, the camera of the mind, the one trained to read subtle cues in human behavior, caught the flicker of hesitation, the unguarded moment that revealed Antonio's humanity beneath the hardened exterior. Isabella, though the Queen of Shadows, understood this instinctively. Power without understanding was brittle, control without empathy was hollow. And in that rare recognition of shared strength and vulnerability, the seeds of dark love were sown, a dangerous, intoxicating connection that would complicate every strategic decision she would face in the coming nights. Outside, the rain continued its relentless percussion, the city's neon lights reflecting in the puddles like fractured mirrors of possibility and consequence. The world of mafia clubs, of state contacts, of wealth and fear, pressed in from every side. And Isabella felt the weight of the empire she commanded, the fragile threads of humanity she sought to preserve, and the unexpected emotional tides that threatened to overturn the calculated order of her life. Every step she took, every glance she gave, reverberated across New York City's underworld. Whispers of dark love, unexpected alliances, and humanity behind power spread silently through the shadows. The next confrontation would not be trivial. It would test her control, her moral compass, and the fragile trust of those around her. A sudden commotion near the exit, an uninvited guest, a minor gang testing the boundaries of respect, escalated quickly, and without hesitation. Isabella and Marco moved like synchronized predators, their movements precise, commanding, unstoppable. The chaos revealed more than just the need for physical control. It exposed hidden allegiances, moral choices, and the subtle, dangerous dance of loyalty and desire that threaded through every encounter in this world. By the time the scuffle ended, respect for the Queen of Shadows had deepened, whispered among those present with awe and fear, and even Antonio Rossi, the rival king, allowed a rare flicker of approval to cross his otherwise unreadable face. In these moments, Isabella's humanity, the unexpected love she allowed herself to feel, the understanding of power and morality intertwined, became both her shield and her signature, a silent force that inspired loyalty, fear, and intrigue in equal measure. The night was far from over, but the first tests had begun. Each interaction, each choice, each unspoken word, laid the groundwork for conflicts, alliances, and passions that would define the empire she ruled. In the shadows of New York, where mafia power intertwined with human desires and moral dilemmas, Isabella Moretti continued her careful, unstoppable march, a queen whose dark love and calculated humanity made her both feared and unforgettable. The city watched, the storm raged, and the subtle, irresistible tension of power, respect, and forbidden desire thickened around her like a cloak, ready to reveal its secrets in the coming nights. The storm outside had not relented, the rain now cascading in sheets that made the city's neon lights shimmer like fractured glass. Inside the club, the subtle tension from the previous confrontations had only intensified. Isabella's sharp gaze moved across the room with meticulous precision, noting every gesture, every whispered exchange, every subtle glance that might hint at a betrayal or an alliance waiting to be exploited. The underworld of New York City was a living organism, its veins pulsing with fear, ambition, and desire, and Isabella navigated it with a calculated grace that made her presence almost mythic. Marco remained at her side, a constant shadow, watching over her while maintaining the appearance of a loyal subordinate. Yet he, like every other observer in the room, sense the undercurrent of something far more dangerous. A power struggle that would test not only their strategic acumen, but also the fragile morality that Isabella carried within her heart. Antonio Rossi lingered in the distance, his figure imposing yet composed, observing the room with the detached confidence of a man who had weathered storms far more dangerous than a few minor gang disputes. His presence was a catalyst, a reminder that even the most carefully maintained empire could be shaken by forces that were both personal and political. As Isabella's gaze swept the crowd, she identified subtle shifts in behavior. A minor gang leader fidgeting too much, a woman adjusting her necklace nervously, a man whose eyes met hers for a fleeting second before darting away. Every detail was significant. Every interaction a potential threat or an opportunity. Her humanity, her unexpected capacity for empathy, allowed her to read these subtle signs in a way no one else could, giving her an edge that was both feared and respected. The first true test came from an unexpected source. A rival faction, emboldened by whispers of her vulnerabilities, attempted a brazen move. An attempt to intercept one of her key contacts in the Mafia clubs. A man whose loyalty had been secured through years of strategic alliance and careful negotiation. The attack was swift, violent, and audacious, but Isabella's instincts had already anticipated such a possibility. With a commanding gesture, she directed Marco and her trusted enforcers to contain the threat. Every move was precise, every command executed with seamless authority, demonstrating not only her control over the immediate chaos, but also the broader power she wielded across New York City's underworld. Amid the controlled chaos, Isabella's mind worked rapidly, calculating the implications of each action. Every decision had a ripple effect. A choice made in the heat of the moment could strengthen her empire, or expose a vulnerability that rivals would exploit without mercy. It was a delicate balance between power and morality, control and humanity, and Isabella navigated it with the precision of a master strategist. Antonio, observing from the shadows, allowed a rare flicker of admiration to cross his face. He had encountered many leaders, many who wielded fear as their primary weapon, but Isabella's combination of strategic brilliance, emotional intelligence, and the subtle allure of dark love made her singular in a world that thrived on brutality. The minor skirmish revealed more than just the loyalty of her allies. It exposed cracks in the structure of rival factions, opportunities that could be exploited, and the subtle, dangerous dance of trust and betrayal that defined the Mafia hood. In a quiet moment after the threat had been neutralized, Isabella allowed herself a brief reflection. Her humanity, the capacity for unexpected love, the empathy that often conflicted with her ruthlessness, was both her greatest strength and her deepest vulnerability. It reminded her that power without conscience was hollow, that respect earned through fear alone could never create true loyalty. Meanwhile, Antonio made his approach, his steps deliberate, measured, echoing softly in the lounge. Their exchange was brief but loaded with meaning. Words carefully chosen, glances charged with unspoken promises and warnings. In that fleeting encounter, the tension between them intensified, a dark love simmering beneath the surface, dangerous in its intensity, and impossible to ignore. Outside, the storm mirrored the turmoil within, each flash of lightning illuminating the rain-soaked streets as if revealing the invisible threads connecting power, loyalty, and desire. Isabella understood that the night would demand not only her strategic brilliance, but also her capacity to navigate moral complexities. A single misstep could ignite a war, destroy fragile alliances, or compromise the unexpected love she felt for a man whose presence both threatened and captivated her. The hours unfolded with relentless intensity. Conversations were intercepted, threats neutralized before they could manifest, and subtle power plays orchestrated with precision. Isabella's ability to maintain control while appearing effortless only deepened her aura of respect and fear. Marco observed silently, ever loyal, aware that the stakes were higher than any battle they had faced before. The balance of power in New York City's underworld was shifting, and the Queen of Shadows was at the center of the storm. As dawn approached, a fragile calm settled over the city. The storm had passed, leaving streets glistening with rain and the lingering scent of ozone, a reminder of the chaos that had raged and the fragile peace that remained. Isabella stepped onto the balcony, her gaze sweeping the skyline of New York City, each glowing window a silent witness to the power, wealth, and humanity intertwined in her world. In her hand rested a glass of dark liquor, a temporary solace, a momentary pause before the next challenge emerged. Her thoughts drifted to Antonio Rossi, to the dangerous, intoxicating connection they shared, and to the choices that lay ahead. Every decision carried consequences, every alliance required vigilance, and every moment of unexpected tenderness risked exposure to vulnerability. Yet she embraced it all, knowing that in a world ruled by shadows, love, morality, and power were often inseparable. In these hours, the threads of suspense, dark love, and moral complexity wove themselves tighter around her, setting the stage for conflicts, revelations, and emotional payoffs that would shape the empire she ruled. Isabella Moretti, Queen of Shadows, understood that her journey was far from over. Each step forward, each decision made, carried weight not only for her empire but also for the fragile humanity she had allowed herself to nurture. The city continued to breathe, its lights reflecting the duality of danger and beauty, control and vulnerability, love and power. A perfect mirror of the queen who ruled its shadows with unmatched precision and enigmatic grace. And as the first rays of sunlight pierced the rain-soaked horizon, a new chapter of intrigue, alliance, and temptation began, promising challenges that would test her strength, her heart, and the dark love that intertwined with every choice she made. The morning haze hung over New York City like a fragile veil, softening the edges of a city that thrived on sharpness, danger, and calculated moves. Isabella Moretti stood in her private office, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing a skyline that glittered with wealth and whispered secrets. Marco leaned against the doorway, silent and watchful, his presence a grounding force against the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. The previous night's events had revealed cracks not only in rival factions, but also in the seemingly unshakable loyalty within her own empire. Power, she had learned, was a double-edged blade. It could command fear, respect, and obedience, yet it could never fully shield the heart from betrayal or the consequences of emotional entanglements. Her thoughts drifted to Antonio Rossi, the rival king whose charm and cunning mirrored her own. Their connection, dangerous and intoxicating, was both a weapon and a vulnerability. It challenged the very foundations of her control, forcing her to confront feelings she had long buried beneath layers of discipline and ruthlessness. As she considered the delicate web of alliances and enmities, a sudden message arrived, a coded warning that a member of her inner circle had been compromised. The betrayal was subtle, almost imperceptible, hidden in the nuances of loyalty and conversation, yet its implications were profound. Isabella felt the familiar sting of disbelief, followed quickly by the cold clarity of a mind trained to survive the treacheries of the Mafia hood. Every decision from this point would carry weight, testing her morality, her instincts, and her ability to maintain control over both empire and emotion. Marco's steady voice broke through her contemplation. "It's coming from within, Bella. Someone we trusted. They've aligned with Antonio's people. They're waiting for the right moment." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of impending chaos. Betrayal within her ranks was dangerous. It threatened her control, the stability of her empire, and the delicate balance of dark love she had cultivated. Isabella's gaze hardened, her mind racing through contingencies, strategies, and possible outcomes. Power was never just about dominance. It was about understanding the human heart, predicting behavior, and making choices that weighed morality against necessity. She recalled the streets of her childhood, the cold nights when trust was a luxury she could not afford, and how every moral choice carried consequences that could ripple for years. Antonio's presence in her thoughts was unavoidable. His subtle influence on the city's network, his charm, and his unpredictable nature created a tension she could neither ignore nor fully control. The possibility of betrayal from within her ranks, compounded by the dangerous allure of unexpected love, created a tempest within her, one that demanded action, clarity, and precision. She summoned her closest advisors, a select group of enforcers and strategists who had proven loyalty through decades of shared survival and conquest. The meeting was intense. Words were measured, glances were loaded, and each participant understood the stakes. Every ally was questioned, every loyalty verified, and subtle tests were applied to reveal hidden motives. The process was exhaustive, emotionally taxing, and morally challenging. Isabella, despite her reputation as an unflinching queen, allowed herself the rare vulnerability of doubt. How could she discern truth from deception when even the most trusted faces might conceal ambition, fear, or desire? The hours passed in a tense rhythm, punctuated by silent moments of reflection, whispered instructions, and the faint hum of the city beyond her office windows. Outside, New York City pulsed with life, unaware of the intricate power plays, betrayals, and moral calculations unfolding within the walls of the Mafia empire. As evening approached, the first signs of confrontation emerged. A trusted lieutenant, whose loyalty had never been questioned, was discovered communicating secretly with a rival faction, a revelation that cut deeper than any knife. Isabella's response was measured, a mixture of cold strategy and restrained emotion. She confronted the lieutenant privately, her words precise, her gaze unwavering. The betrayal was acknowledged, the consequences outlined, and the human complexity of the moment was clear. Loyalty, fear, and morality intertwined in a deadly dance. Antonio Rossi, observing from the periphery, recognized the elegance and ruthlessness of her approach. Their eyes met across the room, a silent acknowledgement of respect, intrigue, and the dark, undeniable attraction that neither could suppress. The night's events escalated further as the rival faction, sensing vulnerability, made a bold move, attempting to infiltrate one of her key Mafia clubs. Isabella, prepared and unyielding, orchestrated a countermeasure that was as precise as it was ruthless. The confrontation was swift, controlled, and decisive, sending a clear message. Betrayal would not be tolerated, power would not be undermined, and her unexpected humanity, the empathy that made her unique, would never compromise the strength she wielded. In the aftermath, as the city's lights reflected in rain-soaked streets, Isabella allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her empire was intact, yet the moral dilemmas she faced had deepened. Power, she understood, was inseparable from responsibility. Loyalty was a fragile construct, and love, dark, dangerous, and unexpected, could be both a weapon and a vulnerability. Marco stood silently, his loyalty unwavering, as Isabella contemplated the path forward. Every choice now carried profound implications. Alliances could be forged or broken, enemies could become unexpected allies, and her connection with Antonio Rossi could tip the delicate balance of power, for better or worse. As dawn approached, the city seemed to pause, holding its breath in anticipation of the next move, the next revelation, the next test of morality, strategy, and heart. Isabella Moretti, Queen of Shadows, understood that the true battle was not only for control of the Mafia hood but also for the preservation of humanity, the careful navigation of dark love, and the unyielding assertion of respect and authority that defined her reign. In this moment, the threads of suspense, betrayal, power, and forbidden desire were interwoven more tightly than ever, setting the stage for a chain of events that would test her skill, courage, and heart in ways the city had never witnessed. And as the first light of morning filtered through the storm-touched skyline, Isabella knew that every decision, every glance, every heartbeat mattered in the dangerous game of empire, love, and survival. The shadows she ruled were alive with secrets, ambitions, and human complexities, and she would navigate them with the same calculated brilliance, dark charm, and unstoppable force that had made her the Mafia queen who ruled them all. The city's skyline was cloaked in a foggy dusk, the streets slick with lingering rain, reflecting the fractured neon lights of New York City like shards of broken promises. Isabella Moretti moved through the quiet halls of her private mansion, each step measured, deliberate, a queen surveying her kingdom in the fragile calm before the storm. The betrayal from within her ranks had ignited a spark, a warning, a challenge, and an opportunity all at once. Marco followed closely, silent yet vigilant, aware that the next few hours would demand not only strength but cunning, loyalty, and an intimate understanding of human nature. Isabella's mind raced as she considered every possible outcome. The underworld was a chessboard where every piece could turn traitor, every ally could become a weapon, and every miscalculation could cost blood, trust, or empire. The subtle threads of dark love she carried for Antonio Rossi, now heightened by shared glances and mutual respect, complicated her calculations further. He was both a threat and an ally, a dangerous tension pulling at her control with an irresistible force. As night deepened, intelligence from her network confirmed the imminent attack. The rival faction, emboldened by her recent internal betrayal, had plotted to strike at her strongest asset. The Mafia club she had built as both a fortress and a symbol of power. The operation was precise, calculated, and ruthless. Isabella's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of challenge, the clarity that came with understanding the stakes, and the thrill of the inevitable confrontation that tested her authority, morality, and cunning. She arrived at the club with Marco at her side, their presence a silent signal of dominance. The lights flickered, casting elongated shadows across the wet pavement outside, the faint hum of distant traffic merging with the pulse of tension that hung over the city. Inside, her trusted enforcers took positions with quiet efficiency, prepared for the first breach. The enemy moved swiftly, shadows blending with the darkness, attempting to infiltrate and destabilize her operation. Yet Isabella's foresight, the result of decades navigating the Mafia hood, allowed her to anticipate every move. With a subtle signal, the counterattack began. Enforcers moved with synchronized precision, traps triggered, and the first wave of assailants found themselves ensnared in a carefully orchestrated net of strategy and force. The confrontation was tense, cinematic, and ruthless, but Isabella's humanity, the empathy that allowed her to understand the fears and motivations of her enemies, guided her decisions, ensuring that strength was measured and control maintained without unnecessary bloodshed. Amid the chaos, Antonio Rossi appeared unexpectedly, stepping into the battle with controlled confidence. His presence was both challenge and reassurance, a test of her dominance and an unspoken promise that power and dark love could coexist in the shadows. Together, their silent coordination turned the tide. The rival faction, unprepared for the combination of calculated strategy and unexpected alliance, faltered under the precise, almost choreographed counterstrike. Every movement, glance, and decision reinforced Isabella's command and displayed the subtle art of leadership in the Mafia world. Power, respect, and love intertwined in dangerous equilibrium. The aftermath left the club intact, her empire unscathed, and the enemy weakened but not destroyed. A reminder that the game of control was ongoing, fluid, and unforgiving. Isabella's gaze met Antonio's across the chaos, a silent acknowledgement of the fragile trust and mutual understanding that had formed between them, a bond that defied logic, danger, and convention. As the city outside settled into a quiet rhythm, Isabella retreated to a private room, allowing herself a rare moment of reflection. Her empire had endured, but the lessons of betrayal and the delicate balance of dark love lingered. Power was a constant negotiation, morality a series of calculated risks, and humanity, the unexpected capacity to love, both shielded and endangered her. Marco observed her quietly, understanding that while she was invincible in strategy, the weight of emotion and human connection remained her most complex challenge. The night stretched on, filled with quiet victories, subtle recalibrations, and unspoken acknowledgments of danger and desire. Isabella contemplated the path ahead. Consolidating loyalty, managing rival factions, navigating the intricate dance with Antonio Rossi, and preserving the fragile humanity she had allowed herself to nurture. Every choice carried consequences, every glance was laden with meaning, and every heartbeat echoed the duality of empire and emotion. By dawn, the first hints of light touched the skyline, reflecting off the rain-soaked streets like fractured mirrors of ambition, power, and desire. Isabella Moretti, Queen of Shadows, understood that the night had tested her authority, loyalty, and emotional resilience, and that the trials of dark love, moral dilemmas, and ruthless strategy were far from over. The city was alive with secrets, waiting for the next move, the next betrayal, and the next revelation. And as the early morning mist enveloped New York City, Isabella stood poised, unshaken yet deeply aware that every shadow, every alliance, and every forbidden desire would shape the empire she ruled, the love she guarded, and the humanity she refused to surrender. The city woke slowly under a pale, hesitant dawn, the streets still glistening with rain, reflecting both the chaos of the night and the fragile calm that followed. Isabella Moretti stood on the balcony of her private office, her dark eyes tracing the skyline of New York City, as if reading the hidden patterns of power, alliances, and ambition etched across the buildings. Marco remained near, silent but alert, his gaze following every movement, anticipating threats, protecting the queen who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. The previous night had left subtle scars, both strategic and emotional. Rival factions had been weakened, but not destroyed, and the threads of loyalty within her own empire had been tested to the limits. Isabella understood that in the Mafia hood, peace was only ever temporary, and the consequences of victory were never truly settled. Yet beneath the surface of calculated authority, her thoughts returned inevitably to Antonio Rossi. The dangerous, intoxicating connection they shared had grown stronger in the crucible of conflict. Each glance, each unspoken word between them, carried a tension that was at once perilous and irresistible. Dark love, she realized, was both her strength and her vulnerability, a force that could sharpen focus and intuition while simultaneously threatening control, judgment, and the delicate balance of her empire. Inside the mansion, intelligence arrived. Whispers of a new player in the underworld, a faction rising from the shadows, challenging both Isabella's influence and Antonio's reach. The news sparked a flurry of activity, calls, coded messages, and rapid strategic meetings, but Isabella, as always, remained composed, her mind orchestrating the movements of allies, enforcers, and contacts like a masterful composer arranging a complex symphony. Yet even as she commanded the empire with precision, the human side of her, her morality, her empathy, and the unexpected love she allowed herself to feel, pulled her attention toward decisions that went beyond raw power. Marco observed her quietly, recognizing the delicate balance she maintained. The queen's ruthlessness intertwined with humanity, the strategist's mind tempered by heart, and the leader's authority softened subtly by love that neither confessed nor denied. Later that evening, a discreet meeting was arranged in a secluded, opulent mafia club, the type where wealth, power, and danger mingled like perfume in the air. Isabella arrived with Marco, her aura radiating authority, beauty, and the unspoken warning that she could both destroy and protect in equal measure. Antonio Rossi was already present, his sharp gaze assessing, calculating, and yet betraying the faintest flicker of admiration and desire. Their interaction was measured, charged with the unspoken history of dark love, mutual respect, and the undeniable tension that hovered like electricity between them. As the conversation unfolded, Isabella navigated subtle negotiations with rival factions, balancing threats and promises, using intelligence, charm, and authority to maintain her supremacy. The new player in the underworld revealed themselves in a subtle maneuver, a test rather than a declaration of war, but Isabella's instincts immediately recognized the stakes. Every gesture, every word, every pause was laden with meaning, a dangerous dance of power and morality. The evening's tension escalated when the traitorous lieutenant from her empire appeared unexpectedly, claiming loyalty and offering information on the rival faction's hidden operations. Isabella's mind raced, weighing the truth against deception, opportunity against risk. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as every participant sensed the delicate balance of power, desire, and potential betrayal. Marco's subtle cues guided her attention, yet the ultimate decision rested in Isabella's hands, a moral choice that could redefine loyalty, enforce authority, and determine the survival of both empire and heart. With precise, deliberate words, she confronted the lieutenant, extracting truth, uncovering hidden intentions, and asserting control over the situation. The revelation was a shock, yet it confirmed the need for vigilance, cunning, and strategic ruthlessness. Meanwhile, Antonio Rossi remained an enigmatic presence, ally, rival, and dangerous temptation all at once. The connection between them, simmering with intensity, remained unspoken but palpable, a dark love that could either fortify their mutual strength or compromise their judgment in the coming battles. The night culminated in a tense cinematic standoff. Rival factions, their motives partially revealed, tested boundaries, probed defenses, and measured Isabella's resolve. Her response was flawless, a combination of intelligence, strategy, and controlled force that reinforced her dominance while preserving the delicate threads of morality and unexpected empathy that defined her rule. By the time the city outside settled into a quiet rhythm, Isabella had reaffirmed her control, neutralized threats, and solidified the loyalty of those who mattered. Yet the tension with Antonio lingered, a constant undercurrent of danger and desire, complicating decisions and heightening stakes. As the first hint of dawn approached, Isabella allowed herself a rare pause, reflecting on power, humanity, and the dark love that threaded through her life. Every choice carried consequences, every alliance was tentative, and every heartbeat echoed the duality of control and vulnerability. New York City, vast and merciless, continued to pulse with ambition, greed, and hidden agendas, but the Queen of Shadows, Isabella Moretti, remained unshaken, poised to navigate the intertwining worlds of wealth, crime, morality, and forbidden love. And as the storm of night faded into the fragile light of morning, she understood one undeniable truth. Power could be asserted, respect commanded, and love concealed, but in the shadows of the city, every secret, desire, and moral choice would eventually demand revelation. The threads of suspense, betrayal, and dark romance had tightened, setting the stage for conflicts and decisions that would challenge her authority, test her humanity, and push the boundaries of the love she had allowed herself to embrace. The city had settled into an uneasy quiet, but Isabella knew better than to trust appearances. New York streets, slick with the aftermath of storms, reflected the hidden turbulence of the Mafia underworld. Power struggles, whispered betrayals, and dangerous desires moving invisibly beneath the neon glow. Isabella Moretti's sharp gaze pierced the dim light of her private office, scanning reports, encrypted messages, and subtle intelligence feeds. Marco stood behind her, the silent anchor to her storm of calculations, observing every detail, anticipating the moves of both allies and enemies. The new faction had begun to make its presence felt, testing boundaries, probing weaknesses, and daring to challenge the Queen of Shadows. Every message, every subtle movement of their operatives, was a threat, but Isabella thrived in danger. Her mind worked like a scalpel, dissecting strategy, psychology, and morality simultaneously, preparing for the confrontation she knew was inevitable. Antonio Rossi's name hovered in her thoughts, a constant tension that complicated decisions, sharpened instincts, and threatened to expose the vulnerable part of her heart she rarely acknowledged. Their connection, electric and unspoken, was a dangerous force, pulling at her focus while reinforcing the strength and audacity she wielded in the streets and mafia clubs. By midnight, the first tangible threat emerged, a coordinated strike aimed at one of her most profitable establishments. Isabella, anticipating the attack, had already positioned her enforcers, secured escape routes, and established contingencies that mirrored a chess master anticipating several moves ahead. The confrontation was imminent, cinematic in its precision. Shadows moved like predators across the darkened streets as Isabella arrived at the club with Marco, her presence radiating authority, danger, and unspoken allure. The rival faction had underestimated her. Their operatives were precise, yes, but they lacked the vision, the understanding of human nature, and the tactical brilliance that Isabella wielded effortlessly. The clash unfolded with controlled chaos, swift, calculated, and lethal without excess. Every decision was a blend of strategy and moral calculation. Isabella allowed only necessary force, preserving both human life and loyalty where possible, yet striking ruthlessly against betrayal and encroachment. Antonio Rossi appeared unexpectedly in the fray, his presence a mixture of challenge and aid, testing her command while supporting her in subtle, unmistakable ways. Their synergy, unspoken yet undeniable, turned the tide, showcasing the dangerous allure of dark love interwoven with calculated authority. As the rival faction faltered, Isabella observed the subtle cracks in their loyalty and discipline, exploiting weaknesses without hesitation. She understood that true power was not only in strength but in understanding the human heart, fear, ambition, love, and morality all interlacing to create vulnerability or dominance. The battle concluded with precision, leaving Isabella's empire intact and her authority reinforced. The rival faction had been tested and warned. The Queen of Shadows could not be underestimated. Yet the night had taken its toll, not in physical scars, but in the subtle erosion of trust, the deepening of emotional complexity, and the recognition of the precarious balance between power and unexpected love. In the quiet that followed, Isabella retreated to her private chambers. Her gaze lingered on the city skyline, the lights reflecting in the rain-soaked streets like fractured mirrors of ambition, control, and desire. Antonio's presence lingered in her mind, the shared glances, the tension, the dark love that had blossomed amidst danger and strategy. Marco remained her silent guardian, a reminder of loyalty and the enduring bonds forged in the crucible of shared hardship and triumph. The moral dilemmas weighed heavily. Every decision in the Mafia had carried consequences, and the intertwining of power, humanity, and love required constant vigilance. Isabella reflected on the stakes ahead: the consolidation of her empire, the management of rivals, the cultivation of loyalty, and the careful navigation of a connection with Antonio Rossi that was as dangerous as it was intoxicating. The city itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, aware, or perhaps instinctively sensing, the tension that lingered in its shadowed streets, the dangerous interplay of ambition, desire, and morality that defined the Queen of Shadows. And as dawn approached, the first pale light reflected off glass and steel, Isabella understood one immutable truth: control was fleeting, loyalty fragile, and dark love a force both potent and perilous. The challenges ahead would demand cunning, resilience, and the careful preservation of humanity within the ruthless world she ruled. Every heartbeat, every choice, every glance would ripple across New York City's underworld, shaping the destiny of empires, the fate of allies, and the fragile, dangerous bond of dark love that had come to define her existence. In that moment, Isabella Moretti, Queen of Shadows, stood unwavering, poised to confront betrayal, assert power, and navigate the perilous, intoxicating path where strategy, morality, and forbidden desire converged. The sun had barely risen, casting a cold, pale light over the rain-slicked streets of New York City, yet inside Isabella Moretti's private chambers, the atmosphere was charged, heavy with unspoken tension. The recent victory over the rival faction had brought temporary control, but the consequences of power were rarely immediate. They were subtle, insidious, and often painful. Reports arrived of a key informant, one whose loyalty had been taken for granted, found dead in the alleys near a rival mafia club. The news struck like a blade through the careful armor Isabella wore. Marco's face was taut with concern, his silent understanding of her turmoil evident. Loss in the Mafia hood was not just personal. It was a message, a challenge, and a test of authority. Isabella allowed herself a quiet moment, acknowledging the humanity that lurked beneath the steel of her persona. Power demanded control, but it also demanded clarity of mind and heart, and the death of someone trusted tested both. Antonio Rossi's presence lingered, unspoken yet palpable. Their connection, a mixture of danger, temptation, and respect, had intensified with the night's events. Every interaction with him now carried an added layer of weight, the unspoken acknowledgement that desire could threaten control, and that loyalty and love could coexist in dangerous, unpredictable ways. Isabella convened her inner circle in a dimly lit, secluded office within her main club. The air was thick with cigar smoke, tension, and whispered strategies. She outlined the steps to identify the responsible party, manage the optics, and reinforce her empire's stability. Every word was deliberate, every glance weighted, signaling that while grief and anger were present, control remained absolute. The political maneuvering began in earnest. Alliances needed reinforcement, rival factions needed to be reminded of boundaries, and the subtle art of intimidation needed to be applied with precision. Isabella's mind was a blade, cutting through deception, loyalty, and ambition to find the core truths that would preserve power and prevent further loss. Meanwhile, Antonio Rossi appeared at the meeting, a silent, magnetic presence. He contributed with calculated insight, his subtle alignment signaling that while he was a rival, their shared interest in stability and dominance could intersect dangerously and romantically. Isabella found herself torn between the practical need for distance and the magnetic pull of forbidden connection. The tension was almost unbearable, each unspoken word charged with emotion, risk, and potential consequence. Later that evening, a subtle trap was laid for the unseen hand behind the informant's death. Isabella orchestrated the maneuver with precision, blending intellect, charm, and controlled force to bait her adversaries without exposing her vulnerabilities. The city seemed to pulse in tandem with the unfolding drama, its shadows alive with movement, whispers, and the delicate dance of power and secrecy. The confrontation, when it came, was intense yet restrained, an intricate game of psychological dominance rather than brute force. Isabella's adversary, cornered yet defiant, was forced to reveal alliances, weaknesses, and motives, exposing the fragility beneath their audacious front. The successful operation reinforced Isabella's reputation. The Queen of Shadows did not strike blindly. She struck with intellect, foresight, and moral calculation. In the aftermath, she allowed herself a brief, rare moment of reflection with Antonio. Their eyes met across a private room, heavy with the weight of shared experience, danger, and unspoken desire. For a fleeting heartbeat, the city outside ceased to exist. The dark love between them, restrained yet undeniable, had deepened in intensity, threading emotional complexity through the fabric of loyalty, power, and strategy. Marco's quiet presence was a reminder of loyalty's enduring power, contrasting with the dangerous, intoxicating unpredictability of desire. Isabella recognized that every choice now carried layers: empire, human life, morality, and the perilous threat of forbidden affection. She was the queen of shadows, yet she remained human, capable of unexpected love, vulnerable to loss, and responsible for decisions that rippled far beyond her immediate perception. That night, the city slept uneasily, aware only subconsciously of the tension, ambition, and hidden romance pulsing through its veins. Isabella stood at her office balcony once more, looking out over the skyline, contemplating the thread she now had to weave with even more care. Every decision would test her morality, her intellect, and her ability to navigate love in a world ruled by fear, respect, and strategy. And as the first stars faded in the dawn sky, the Queen of Shadows understood that the next moves, the next betrayals, alliances, and moments of temptation would define not only her empire, but also the dark love and humanity that made her both formidable and unforgettable. The city hummed with restless energy, its streets bathed in the dim glow of neon lights and the occasional flicker of failing lampposts. Isabella Moretti stood in the shadowed corners of her private club, her dark eyes scanning the room as whispers of new alliances and secret betrayals reached her through subtle channels. Marco was close by, silent, his expression taut with anticipation, aware that tonight could change everything. The events of the past weeks, the betrayal, the confrontation with the rival faction, the dangerous tension with Antonio Rossi, had all built toward this moment. Isabella could feel it in her bones. A shift in power was imminent, and she needed to act with both caution and brilliance. The first sign came subtly. A trusted lieutenant approached with information about a previously unknown faction, one that had emerged from the shadows and was attempting to negotiate a precarious alliance with Antonio Rossi. Isabella's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the strategic thrill of challenge. Her mind raced through contingencies, potential outcomes, and hidden motives, understanding immediately that alliances forged under pressure could be fragile, dangerous, and potentially transformative. Antonio entered the room with his usual composed elegance, his presence a magnetic pull that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. Their eyes met across the room, each glance charged with unspoken tension, dark desire, and mutual recognition of intelligence and power. Neither spoke. Their connection alone communicated understanding, challenge, and temptation. The betrayal emerged suddenly. A subtle movement in the crowd, a whisper too loud, a hand too close to an inconspicuous weapon. One of Isabella's own, someone she had considered unwaveringly loyal, had aligned with the rival faction in secret. The shock was immediate, cutting deeper than any blade. Power was tested in moments like this, and Isabella's humanity, the unexpected love, the empathy she allowed herself to feel, was now entangled with the raw demands of strategy and authority. Her reaction was precise, measured, and commanding. She isolated the traitor, her voice calm yet razor-sharp, extracting truth while projecting absolute dominance. Every word, every glance, every calculated pause reinforced her authority, reminding all present that the Queen of Shadows tolerated neither deception nor weakness. Meanwhile, the unexpected alliance with the emerging faction forced Isabella to reconsider her options. They were not merely a threat, they were a potential tool, a way to consolidate power and redirect the shifting dynamics in her favor. Antonio observed silently, his expression unreadable, as he gauged the interplay between loyalty, strategy, and the subtle dance of dark love that wove through the room. The night's negotiations were tense, cinematic, and emotionally charged. Isabella leveraged her intelligence, her charm, and her strategic brilliance to assert control, integrating the new faction into her network while subtly reinforcing her own authority. The rival faction, sensing her skill, was forced to retreat strategically, acknowledging her dominance while preserving a tenuous path for survival, a delicate balance between respect, fear, and the unspoken acknowledgement of her genius. As the room settled, the emotional stakes became clear. Isabella's heart, previously shielded by layers of calculated authority, now beat with the tension of moral complexity and the dangerous allure of dark love. Antonio stepped closer, their proximity charged with a quiet electricity that neither could deny. For a fleeting moment, the empire, the betrayal, the alliances, and the shadows of New York City all faded, leaving only two souls intertwined by power, desire, and mutual respect. Marco, ever vigilant, understood that this fragile connection could be both a strength and a vulnerability, a force that could inspire unparalleled loyalty or ignite unforeseen danger. The night ended with Isabella standing alone on the balcony, the city stretching endlessly beneath her. The betrayal had been addressed, the new alliance cautiously secured, and her power reaffirmed. Yet the tension between duty and desire, strategy and emotion, control and dark love, remained unresolved, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the next move. New York City, with its tangled web of ambition, secrecy, and danger, held its breath as the Queen of Shadows contemplated the future. Every choice, every glance, every heartbeat would shape the coming days, test loyalty, and challenge the delicate balance of morality and power that defined her reign. Isabella Moretti understood one immutable truth. The empire she ruled was more than streets, clubs, and wealth. It was a living organism, driven by human desire, fear, and love. And in the heart of that organism, she would navigate betrayal, forge alliances, and explore the dangerous, intoxicating depth of a dark love that threatened to consume her even as it strengthened her. Night fell like a velvet shroud over New York City, its streets awash with the glow of neon and the persistent patter of rain. Isabella Moretti stood at the entrance of her flagship Mafia club, her presence commanding, every movement precise, a living emblem of authority. Marco lingered at her side, eyes scanning the perimeter, alert to the slightest disturbance. The betrayal had been addressed, the unexpected alliance negotiated, but the underworld was never static, power shifted, loyalties wavered, and danger was a constant companion. The new faction, emboldened and strategic, tested her limits. Their first open move came subtly, an orchestrated challenge at one of the Mafia clubs she controlled, a calculated test of dominance that could not be ignored. Isabella anticipated the confrontation with the predator's patience. Every detail of the city's underworld, every whisper and subtle signal, fed into her plan. The streets were alive with unseen tension, every shadow a potential threat, every passerby a messenger of ambition or danger. Inside the club, the air was thick with smoke, perfume, and quiet menace. Patrons continued their business, unaware that the balance of power was being contested in the shadows, yet everyone instinctively knew something significant was unfolding. Antonio Rossi arrived, his presence commanding yet restrained, his gaze meeting Isabella's with the tension of unspoken words and forbidden desire. They moved through the room with synchronized precision, orchestrating strategy and psychological control, blending intimidation with elegance, authority with subtle charm. The rival faction made its move, attempting to assert dominance, test loyalties, and challenge Isabella's command. Yet each step was met with calculated resistance, traps anticipated, and alliances leveraged. Isabella's decisions were precise, each action a blend of strategy, morality, and emotional intelligence. The confrontation escalated, the tension cinematic and electric. Marco and trusted enforcers neutralized threats with efficiency, while Isabella focused on the delicate dynamics of power and emotion. Each gesture, glance, and whispered word carried weight, reinforcing her dominance while subtly threading the dangerous allure of dark love with Antonio. Amid the chaos, the enemy revealed an unexpected weakness, an internal fracture that Isabella's intelligence network had predicted. Exploiting this crack, she orchestrated a countermeasure that turned the tide, asserting dominance without unnecessary bloodshed yet sending an unambiguous message. The Queen of Shadows was untouchable, her authority absolute, and her moral complexity profound. Antonio Rossi, standing close, acknowledged the precision and brilliance of her leadership with a subtle nod. Their connection, simmering with forbidden attraction and mutual respect, had grown deeper amidst the chaos, threading dark love through every strategic maneuver. The night's resolution left Isabella's empire intact, her power reaffirmed, and the rival faction humbled but not destroyed. a careful balance between strength and restraint, fear and respect. Yet the emotional undertones of the evening weighed heavily. Isabella reflected on the delicate balance of loyalty, morality, and desire, understanding that the human heart was as unpredictable and dangerous as any rival faction. Marco's quiet presence reminded her that some bonds were steadfast, while Antonio's lingering gaze hinted at a passion that could both strengthen and compromise her control. As the storm outside subsided, the city lights reflecting on wet streets mirrored the complexity of her empire. Glittering, fractured, alive with secrets and alive with danger. Isabella retreated to her private chambers, allowing herself a rare moment to consider the consequences of the night. Power had been asserted, loyalty tested, alliances reinforced, and dark love quietly acknowledged. Every choice, every decision, every heartbeat carried the weight of the empire, the morality she upheld, and the forbidden attraction that simmered just beneath the surface. And as the first faint rays of morning cut through the rain-soaked skyline, Isabella Moretti, Queen of Shadows, understood that the challenges ahead would be even greater. Betrayals would resurface, alliances would be tested, and the dangerous, intoxicating dark love she shared with Antonio Rossi would continue to thread through every calculation, every battle, and every moral choice. The city exhaled its quiet tension, aware only subconsciously of the threads of power, humanity, and forbidden desire woven into the night. And Isabella, standing poised and unshaken, knew that in this world of shadows, every move mattered, every heart carried risk, and every moment of love, strategy, and morality was a step closer to ultimate control, or devastating loss. The city was drenched in the velvet darkness of night, punctuated by distant sirens, the hum of traffic, and the occasional flicker of neon lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets. Isabella Moretti sat alone in her private chambers, the weight of recent battles pressing heavily on her mind and heart. Marco's presence remained a quiet, stabilizing force, a reminder that loyalty could still be trusted, even in a world dominated by deceit, ambition, and ruthless power. Yet the night had revealed vulnerabilities that Isabella could not ignore. The rival factions had been challenged, alliances tested, and yet the underworld continued to shift unpredictably, like a tide that could turn without warning. Antonio Rossi's shadow lingered in her thoughts, a magnetic presence that pulled at both her desire and her strategic mind. Their connection, dark, intense, and forbidden, had deepened amidst danger and chaos, threading tension through every decision, every glance, every heartbeat. The first shock came as unexpected intelligence arrived. An old ally, thought loyal for decades, had been secretly negotiating with Antonio's rivals, a move that could destabilize her carefully constructed empire. Isabella's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the adrenaline and clarity of someone who thrived on strategic challenge. Every choice now demanded moral discernment, as well as tactical brilliance. She convened a discreet meeting with Marco and a few trusted lieutenants. Words were measured, eyes cautious, and every gesture calculated to maintain control while probing the truth behind the betrayal. The revelations were staggering. Alliances were not what they seemed, loyalties were fragile, and hidden desires, both hers and others, could influence outcomes as much as weapons or money. Isabella realized that the greatest battles were not fought in the streets or mafia clubs, but in the intricate interplay of human ambition, fear, morality, and love. That evening, a clandestine meeting was arranged with Antonio Rossi. The room was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls like specters of past choices. Every glance between them carried unspoken tension, the weight of power, the allure of forbidden connection, and the knowledge that trust was both essential and perilous. Antonio's words were measured, revealing subtle truths about his intentions, his perception of loyalty, and the shifting power dynamics in New York City's underworld. Isabella listened, her mind analyzing every nuance while her heart registered the rare vulnerability she allowed herself to feel. The conversation revealed a critical turning point. The old ally's betrayal was part of a larger plot, a chain reaction that could either strengthen Isabella's reign or expose fatal weaknesses. Yet within that revelation was opportunity, a chance to forge a new order, solidify power, and navigate the dark love that had become intertwined with her empire. Isabella acted with precision. She leveraged the intelligence, orchestrated strategic moves, and used both subtle intimidation and diplomacy to reassert dominance over the underworld, while preserving the alliances necessary for survival. Marco executed her directives flawlessly, ensuring that every tactical and psychological measure reinforced her authority. Amid the orchestrated chaos, the personal stakes were undeniable. Isabella and Antonio shared moments of quiet intensity, glances, fleeting touches, an unspoken acknowledgement of the connection that neither dared to fully confess but which had become impossible to ignore. The night's culmination was a masterful balance of strategy, moral calculation, and human emotion. Betrayal had been exposed, alliances had shifted, and Isabella had emerged not only unscathed but strengthened, her reputation as the Queen of Shadows reinforced across New York City. Yet the emotional and moral complexity of the evening weighed on her. Power, she recognized, was inseparable from responsibility, humanity, and the capacity for unexpected love. Every decision had consequences, and the threads of desire, morality, and authority were intertwined in ways that could strengthen her empire or unravel it completely. As dawn approached, Isabella stood alone on the balcony. The city stretched beneath her like a living organism pulsing with ambition, secrecy, and danger. The stakes had never been higher. Every heartbeat, every glance, every subtle choice would influence the empire she ruled, the lives she touched, and the dark love that had become a quiet, intoxicating force in her life. Marco's watchful presence was a reminder that loyalty still existed, but Antonio's gaze lingered in her memory, a dangerous, alluring presence that challenged her control, her morality, and her heart. Isabella Moretti, Queen of Shadows, understood one immutable truth. The world she ruled was alive with ambition, danger, and forbidden desire, and her greatest challenges, both of power and of the heart, were only beginning. The underworld had tested her intellect, her strategy, and her morality. The dark love she shared, unspoken yet undeniable, had tested her humanity. And as the first light of morning touched the rain-slicked streets, she knew that the final chapter of this battle for power, loyalty, and forbidden desire was approaching. A climax that would define the Queen of Shadows, her empire, and the dangerous, intoxicating love that had become inseparable from both. The night had settled over New York City like a heavy curtain, muffling the sounds of traffic and distant sirens, but within the shadows of the Mafia world, a storm was brewing. Isabella Moretti stood atop the balcony of her private penthouse. The city sprawled beneath her, glittering with ambition, danger, and the unseen currents of power. Marco's silent presence was steady, an anchor in a world that demanded vigilance, strategy, and the courage to act decisively. The betrayals, alliances, and rival factions of recent weeks had culminated in a moment that required clarity, decisiveness, and the careful balance of authority and humanity. Isabella knew that tonight, every choice, every movement, and every word would define not only her empire, but also the legacy she would leave as the Queen of Shadows. A subtle alert arrived through her network, an unexpected convergence of the remaining rival factions, emboldened and desperate, planning a coordinated strike aimed at dismantling her control once and for all. Yet Isabella had anticipated this. Every contingency, every hidden weakness, and every potential ally had been accounted for. The preparation was meticulous, precise, and infused with the psychological understanding that only decades navigating the Mafia hood could provide. Antonio Rossi appeared at her side, his presence both challenge and solace. Their shared glances were a silent acknowledgement of the tension, desire, and mutual respect that had defined their complex, dangerous connection. Dark love, forbidden yet undeniable, had threaded through every confrontation, every moral choice, and every strategic maneuver, strengthening their coordination while intensifying the stakes of the night ahead. The confrontation unfolded with cinematic intensity. Rival factions moved through the streets like shadows, unaware that Isabella's orchestrated network of enforcers and strategic traps awaited. The battle was as much psychological as it was physical. Warnings, manipulations, and subtle displays of dominance reinforced her authority, while every calculated move ensured the survival of allies and the neutralization of threats. Antonio's presence was integral, their unspoken coordination allowing them to anticipate each other's decisions, exploit weaknesses, and maintain an edge over adversaries who underestimated the power of unity, forged in the crucible of shared ambition and desire. As the night reached its climax, the final confrontation with the leader of the rival coalition arrived. The exchange was tense, dramatic, and filled with the moral complexity that Isabella had mastered. Power asserted without unnecessary cruelty, strategy executed with precision, and dominance established with the subtle art of understanding human behavior. The enemy was defeated, the coalition fractured, and Isabella's empire reaffirmed. In the aftermath, the emotional stakes emerged fully. Antonio stepped close, their proximity charged with unspoken acknowledgement of trust, respect, and the dark love that had survived chaos, betrayal, and danger. Isabella allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability, recognizing that power and desire, morality and human emotion, could coexist, even in a world defined by shadows and ruthless ambition. Marco observed quietly, understanding that the true test of leadership was not only in conquest, but also in preserving loyalty, fostering trust, and navigating the delicate threads of humanity within the unforgiving Mafia world. As dawn broke over the city, the skyline illuminated by the soft light of a new day, Isabella Moretti stood poised, unshaken, and victorious. Every choice had been tested, every alliance navigated, and every thread of dark love explored, leaving her empire secure and her heart aligned with the forbidden yet undeniable connection she shared with Antonio Rossi. The city pulsed beneath her, alive with ambition, desire, and untold secrets, yet the Queen of Shadows had established her dominion not only through power and strategy but through the careful preservation of morality, loyalty, and love, unexpected, dangerous, and intoxicating. In that moment, Isabella understood the essence of her reign. She had conquered betrayal, navigated shifting alliances, asserted dominance over the underworld, and allowed herself the rare gift of connection and love. The shadows she ruled were alive with stories of fear, respect, and ambition. But within them, she had also created space for humanity, desire, and dark love to thrive. As the sun rose over New York City, painting the skyline in hues of gold and amber, Isabella and Antonio shared a quiet, lingering gaze. A promise that, despite the dangers, the battles, and the complex web of power, there was a future where authority, strategy, and love could coexist. The empire was hers. The city bowed to her intelligence, charm, and ruthlessness. And the dark love that had woven through her journey, unexpected, forbidden, yet undeniable, had found its place within the shadows she commanded. And so ends the story of Isabella Moretti, the Mafia queen who ruled the shadows, a tale of power, betrayal, morality, and the intoxicating force of dark, unexpected love.